What's in a name? The theme we will be reflecting on as we move toward Advent and prepare ourselves for Christmas over the next 9 weeks is His name shall be. On this first week, our sub-theme is on Jesus, to give us the context of the overall theme. We are indeed talking about the names of Jesus. Jesus was prophesied in the Old Testament as the promised one who would save God's people. The Gospels speak of his birth, namely in Luke and Matthew. And in these passages, we hear many names of Jesus pronounced. And it always starts with the phrase, "He shall be called," or "You shall call him." And so we will spend time in these weeks reflecting on these names that Jesus is associated with. One major confusion sometimes, especially during the season of Advent, is that we always hear the name Emmanuel and Jesus mentioned interchangeably. And sometimes we wonder whether his name is actually Jesus or Emmanuel or both. It is true to our lives that we do not always use our given names. Our parents may have named us at birth, but we may eventually be called by many different names. And even before the birth of a child, parents already begin a relationship with the child in the mother's womb. Through the kicking and the hunger pangs and such, parents will start to notice initial behavioral traits of the child. And this child may be said to be always hungry, and so they may nickname the child as a hungry monster, for example. All these may have an influence on the name that the child may eventually have, and others, of course. And upon the birth and further scrutiny over the personality of the child, we may give the child additional pet names. It could be anything, from Shorty to Hero to Junior. As we grow older too, we are given other names. In our local Chinese and Indian dialects, we have ways to address relatives like the eldest aunt or the third aunt. And there's the titles grandma and granduncle. They are not official names, but they end up becoming our names sometimes. But what these names do is that they give resemblance to us. In the same way, Jesus has been given many names and titles by the Israelites who waited in anticipation for his coming. We call people we know with these different names because they reveal some aspect of who they are. In a sense, then, these names are important. There's so much emphasis given to names in the Bible. They are not accidentals. We even say God has called us by name. From Genesis, God created us and named us. And even the name of Adam, which is the first of God's creation, in Hebrew is a neutral term to signify the word human. It comes from the Hebrew word Adama, which means ground, to let us know that we come from the dust of the earth. God gave new names to people as he called them and as they had significant encounters with him and entered into a relationship with him. Abram became Abraham, Jacob became Israel, Simon became Peter. At the same time, he made us stewards, giving us authority to name all of his creation. Plants and animals do not have their own names. It is given by us, human beings. We have given them names based on their natural qualities and based on their purpose. To name something is to be given power and authority over it. When we name our child, we acknowledge that we are stewards over the child. When we name someone, it is not so much about whether we like the name or not alone. When we name a child, we are discerning God's intention for the child that we are given responsibility over. It is meant to remind us that God has given us a duty to raise this child for his purposes and his will. God instructed both Mary and Joseph, the parents of Jesus, in separate gospel narratives and personally, that the child that Mary was carrying was to be named Jesus. God did not instruct anyone else except Jesus' parents, those he had given specific authority over him, to name him Jesus. The name Jesus means God saves. Jesus was called by that name because this would be his destiny and God's will for him. God's will for him was identified by this name. And one of the things that perhaps we do not do as often these days is to pray about the names of our children. Upon that initial encounter with them in the womb and all the many experiences and events that led to the life of the child, what is God telling us about the child we are bringing into the world? For us who have been given names by our parents, what is the history behind our names? What are the meanings of our names? Many of us may find that our names were not thought through carefully, or we were given it simply because our parents liked it, and it may not fully express who we are. As mentioned earlier, when God called people to himself, they responded and consecrated themselves to his purposes, like Simon or Abram. God gave them new names based on who they were and his will for them. It is a new beginning for them and a new start with a renewed purpose. The church offers us this opportunity in the sacrament of baptism and confirmation. People often do so when they enter religious life. The Pope, too, takes on a new name when he becomes pontiff to establish and reveal the manner and direction of his pontificate. Moving towards Advent, you may want to look at what's in your name and to reflect on how God has been calling you through your name and the historical events that surround your coming into the world up to this present moment. Otherwise, you may like to pray and hold on to a new name or a saint's name to associate with and give you clarity and direction in your walk with God as you strive to follow him and his purposes for you more closely.